Long before the rivers turned quiet and the hills softened their echoes, there was a village tucked between the proud arms of the Benue plain. Its name was Okocha. The villagers called it the heart of men, not because it bettered warriors or kings, though it did, but because it stood as a fortress of pride, tradition, and the unshaken belief that a man's sword was the final law of the earth. In Okocha, men were raised like yam stalks, straight, sturdy, and expected to carry weight. From a young age, boys were taught not to cry, not to pause, not to question. They were carved into providers, protectors, and heads of homes. But somewhere in that carving, their ears were sealed to the whispers of empathy. The women of Okocha, they were as resilient as the red earth. They fetched water with swollen feet, stirred heavy pots under the sun, and carried life in their wombs, while still expected to carry the bodies of the home. It was said that Okocha women were carved from Iroko wood, beautiful but unbending. Yet, even the Iroko breaks when bent too long without rest. Pregnancy in this village was not a sacred journey, it was a duty. To the men, it was a natural part of a woman's makeup, like hair or breast. If a woman was with child, she was still expected to rise with a cock's crow, follow her husband to the farm, and pound yam with the same strength she had before her belly grew round. When a woman complained of pains, she was told, "Your mother did it, didn't she?" When her back cried for rest, she was reminded, "You are strong, you are a woman." Among these women was Ene, soft-spoken and big-eyed, married to a man named Okocha. She was 8 months along with her first child, and every step she took felt like dragging a sack of millet uphill. But Okocha was not cruel. No. He was simply a man of Okocha, raised with the understanding that care meant providing food, not comfort, that love meant giving land, not listening, that pregnancy was something a woman endured quietly. Still, Ene bore her burden with the grace of the moon. She didn't complain much, only sighed when no one watched. Her heart aches more than her swollen feet, not because her husband beat her or cursed her, but because he simply didn't see her. And so the days rolled on, as they had in Okocha. The men plowed their farms, the women tended their homes and bellies, and the sun rose and set with the same rhythm. Until the day the rain came, and with it, a cry that would shake the soul of the village. But that tale, like all powerful ones, must wait for the next fire, the next night, and the next eager ear. The rains in Okocha never fell without reason. The elders often said, "When the sky weeps, the earth listens." And on that morning, the clouds wore the color of money, thick and brooding, like a mother about to break into tears. But in the village, life went on as it always did. Rain or not, yams would not harvest themselves. Ene sat at the edge of her clay veranda, both hands cupping her belly like she feared the baby would fall out if she let go. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. The baby kicked often, restless, strong, just like Oche. She had named the child in her heart already, Tokwase, the one God loves. But it was not God she feared, it was man. That morning, Oche had risen before the sun. His machete swung behind his back as he prepared for another day on the farm. He hadn't looked at Ene closely. He never really did. He simply said, "Warm water should be ready when I return. And pound yam, I am bringing home company." Ene swallowed, then nodded slowly. It was not new. In Okocha, even 8-month pregnancy did not buy rest. Her back screamed with pain. Her ankles were twice their size, and the pounding pistol felt heavier than a hoe. But there was no room for weakness, not for the woman of Okocha. As Oche left, the skies opened up, and the rain poured like grief. Thunder rolled above, but even thunder could not match the heaviness in Ene's chest. She sat for a long while, listening to the rhythm of raindrops and the slow thump of her baby turning. She wanted to rest, just one day, but she rose. She went to the pounding mortar. Her hands trembled as she peeled the yam. The firewood was damp, refusing to catch. Her knees shook as she stood, her belly in front of her like a shield, and rain still falling. And then something broke inside her. Not her waters, but her will. She dropped the pestle, sank to her knees in the mud, and cried. Not the soft weeping of a tired woman, but the loud, bitter sobs of someone who had cried too much for too long. She lifted her eyes to the stormy sky and through her tears whispered, not a prayer, not a curse, just a plea from one soul to the universe. If only men would carry this pain, if only just for a while, they could feel what it means to grow life and still be expected to serve like nothing has changed. Lightning tore across the sky like a crack in heaven. Thunder rolled immediately, like a god has struck his staff on the clouds. Ene's tears dripped into the mud, and the wind suddenly shifted. The rain stopped, just like that. Silence. A strange silence. She stood slowly, confused but calm, and returned to the kitchen to prepare yam, unaware that her cry had been heard, not by a man, not by a god, but by the very spirit of justice that sleeps in the soil of every forgotten woman. That night, the wind whistled a different song through the trees. The women of Okocha felt it, but could not name it. The men snored, full of food and drink, but as they turned in their sleep, some crushed their bellies and frowned, others rolled over with uneasy sighs. And when the rooster crowed the next morning, Okocha would not wake up the same. At first light, the village stared as it always did. Smoke curled lazily from thatched kitchens. Cocks strutted and crowed as if the night had not changed the world, and the scent of roasted granules mingled with the mist. But something was off. It started with Aduga, the palm wine tapper, who woke up with a terrible taste in his mouth and the strange urge to eat cassava. He staggered outside, rubbed his eyes, and promptly vomited into his white calabash of water. She shrieked, not because of the mess, but because Aduga never got sick. Not even when he drank a full gourd of wine on an empty stomach. Then there was Baba Agbo, a grandfather of 7, who rose from his mouth and felt a cramp so sharp he fell back down. Groaning, his wife rushed to him, thinking it was a stroke, but he clutched his lower back and muttered, Something is pulling me from inside. By midday, it has spread. Men all over Okocha were vomiting. They complained of pounding headaches, tender nipples, mood swings, and swollen feet. The more they complained, the funnier the woman found it. It's malaria, one elder said. Poison from the stream, another guessed. But their wives only raised their eyebrows. A group of young men gathered in the square, their shirt half-buttoned, faces pale. I can't eat anything, said Obande. Even the smell of roasted maize makes me gag. I cried when I saw a goat limping today, confessed another. I don't know what is wrong with me. Women walked by and smirked, holding their laughter in their throats. Some openly giggled. Ene, who had said nothing on money, simply watched. Oche came home early from the farm, wiping his sweaty brow and groaning. My back, he muttered, falling onto a stool. Ene looked up when she was shelling egusi. Your back, she asked softly. Yes, he snapped. It feels like I have been carrying bags of stone all day. She tilted her head. But isn't that what you expect me to carry even now? Oche blinked. Something about her voice, too calm, too knowing, sent a chill through him. That evening, the village square was unusually quiet. Men gathered, their egos deflated, their eyes tired. One by one, the symptoms intensified. Swollen bellies, dizziness, sudden urges to cry. One man claimed he dreamt he was breastfeeding. The elders gathered. They summoned the village herbalist Mama Yange, who chewed kola nut slowly and said, This is not illness. This is justice. They called the hunter from the hills, thinking perhaps an evil wind had blown from the forest. He shook his head. No animal carries a curse this gentle. This is woman's weight. Panic set in when they realized the bellies weren't swelling from food or drink. They were rounding out like pregnant women. Slowly and steady, with a weight that pressed on their backs and pride, the village pastor arrived, caught by a messenger who ran to the next town in fear. He looked at the men, prayed in tongues, and paused. The solution, he said at last, is not in herbs or holy waters. The solution is kindness. The men scoffed. Kindness, Baba Abu's part. What kind of charm is that? Something that costs nothing, yet you never gave it, the pastor said, turning to leave. That night, the wind shifted again. The moon refused to show her face, and the spirit that walked through the village did not wear chains or scream, but the silent satisfaction of long overdue balance. By the next morning, the village of Okocha was unrecognizable. The market, usually alive with chatter, had fallen silent. The mortar sat untouched. Stalls remained half-filled, their owners missing. The women of Okocha moved about with subtle smile, their wrappers tied tighter, their steps lighter. They knew something the men were trying to deny. At the village square, a crowd had gathered, not for festival, not for money, but for bewilderment. Men sat on logs and wooden benches, hunched over, groaning softly. Some clutched their bellies, others rubbed their backs or twisted their faces at the main scent of palm oil. I was frying akara muttered Ose, the butcher, and I began to cry. Not tears of pain, tears as if I had just watched my cow give birth. The others nodded, disturbed. I feel like something is moving in my stomach, Oche confessed in a hushed tone to a group of men, his hands rubbing the base of his belly. That's how my wife described it before she delivered last year, said another. Deliver? Someone laughed nervously. Are we with child? The idea was so ridiculous they broke into laughter, but it was a broken, uncertain kind of laugh. It didn't reach their eyes. Meanwhile, the women continued as usual, but with a new air of quiet satisfaction. Some offered their husband food. The soft, eat small now if you can, Others watched with curiosity as their men struggled to rise from the ground, groaning as if their joints were rusted. Ernest said little. She moved about slowly, balancing her real pregnancy while observing the false ones blooming around her. She could see the change in her chair, confusion shadowing his face, pride wilting like overcooked vegetables. By midday, things got stranger. Men who had mocked women for being too emotional began crying over small things. Burnt plantain, a child stepping on their toes, the sound of a flute. One man, Okocha, the stone-faced carpenter, was seen gently petting a chicken and whispering apologies for once chasing it with a stick. The village women could barely contain themselves. "Look at them," Mama Yanga said to a group of younger women, tasting just one bite of what we swallow every day. "Not even labor pains yet," Ernest added softly. "Let's wait until they start craving mud," another joked, and they all burst into laughter. But not all the women were laughing. Some were watching with deep, haunted eyes. Mothers who had lost babies while crying firewood. Wives who had labored silently with no hand to hold. Daughters who had buried their pain beneath obedience. To them, this wasn't just funny. It was vindication. Back in the square, the elders had called yet another meeting. Okocha sat near the front, sweating despite the cold wind. His hands rested on his stomach, like a man unsure whether to protect or replicate. "This cannot continue," Baba Ago said, limping. "The gods are mocking us. The gods are teaching us," the pastor countered, standing calmly in their midst. "Teaching you what you fail to learn with your ears." Okocha looked around at men who used to boldly laugh and stomp their feet in dominance. Now they winced with every step, sighed with every sentence. Even walking became a chore. For the first time in his life, Okocha looked at his wife and truly saw her. The way she walked carefully, her hands always resting on her belly, the way her eyes fought through fatigue, the quiet patience in her movements. He remembered how just days ago he taught her how to pound yam in the rain. He felt a sharp pain in his side. He winced, held it and whispered, "I am sorry." She turned to him slowly. "For what?" He shook his head. "I don't know yet." And in that moment, the seed of understanding was planted. Small, fragile, but real. By the fifth day, Okocha was no longer a village. It was a theater of confusion. Men who had stood with pride now shuffled like old women carrying secrets. Their stomachs had grown unmistakably round, as if their bodies had conspired against them in the night. Their voices wavered, their knees buckled, their tempers frayed over the smallest things. But perhaps the strangest change of all was the fear. Men for the first time began to fear their own bodies. They no longer trusted their strength, no longer mocked the delicate balance of fatigue and emotion. They woke in the night sweating, from dreams they could not explain, dreams of labor, of crying out in pain with no one coming to help, of carrying something heavy and sacred and unknown. The village was split. Some of the men thought it was witchcraft. Others whispered that the gods were punishing them for something they had not yet named. A few, just a few, began to look inward. But while the men argued, stumbled, and vomited, the women carried on. They gathered in cycles in the evenings, weaving baskets and telling stories, laughing quietly at the irony of it all. For the first time, they didn't have to hide their weariness or mask their pain. For the first time, they watched men live what they had lived in silence for generations. Still, not all the women laughed. Mama Aji, the oldest midwife in the village, sat outside her compound and stared at the sky. "This is not just for punishment," she told One, who had come to sit beside her with a bowl of sweetened millet. It's for remembrance. Because if you don't feel something, you won't carry it with you into the future. Enya nodded slowly. Her own belly was heavier now. The baby moved often, as if dancing in response to a strange energy around it. She looked at her husband Oche, who had taken to lying on the veranda, groaning softly, one hand rubbing his side, the other gripping his thigh. He had not asked her to pound yam since that day. He no longer walked in and expected food on his table. He had even started noticing when her face swelled, but he hadn't yet apologized. And the spirit that heard her cry that day, the force that had shifted the balance of nature, it was not one to be easily appeased with silence. That evening, a loud cry echoed through the village. Not the cry of a woman in labor, but that of Agaba, the strongest man in Okocha. The man who once lifted a goat above his head to win a bet. Now he was on the ground, caught it himself, face contorted in pain. "Something is tearing me apart," he screamed, clutching his belly. "It's like I'm giving birth to thunder." The village rushed to him. Even the harvesters could not carry him. His wife stood helplessly, arms crossed. "What did you think it felt like?" one of them asked coldly. "Carrying a human inside you for 9 months like it was cassava in a basket?" He cried out again, tears running freely down his face. The elders gathered again. "This has gone too far," Baba Agbo said. "You must beg the gods." "No," the pastor said, his eyes calm. "You must beg your wives." The men looked at each other. Apologize? To their wives? For what? For tradition? For doing what their fathers did and their fathers for them? Yes. The pastor stepped forward. This punishment cannot be undone by prayer because it is not spiritual. It is a wound of the heart, and only humility can heal that. A long silence followed, and then the first break. "I am sorry," whispered the youngest man, barely of age, whose belly had begun to swell 2 days ago. "I am sorry for all the times I laughed when my sister cried. I'm sorry for thinking women were just meant to suffer in silence." And just like that, he stood straighter. The swell in his stomach seemed to fade, slowly, like the morning mist chased by the sun. The villagers gasped. "It's true," someone whispered, and suddenly a murmur began, a ripple of confession. "I am sorry," said another, tears in his eyes. "To my wife for calling her lazy when she asked to rest. I am sorry," said a third, "for every night I let her sleep in pain without asking her how she felt." One by one, they came undone, and with the apologies spoken from a place of sincerity, not shame, not pressure, the symptoms began to melt away. But not all men could speak. Not all men in Okocha were quick to surrender. As news spread across the village that apologies could undo the strange pregnancy, some men grumbled and scoffed. They stood with arms crossed, belly swollen, eyes burning with stubbornness. What kind of magic listened to feelings? But it's Soyongu, a former warrior known for once chasing a lion out of his farm. "This is a woman's trick, a curse. I will not kneel to my wife, never." Others nodded. They began to form a quiet alliance. The proud ones, the woman called them. A band of swollen, bitter men who refused to bend their knees, even as their backs curved under invisible weights. Every morning they woke up to heavier bellies, their nose widened, their feet ached, their moods changed like the weather. One of them, Tenor, threw up 17 times in a single day. Still, he clenched his teeth and said nothing. "Let this pass," he muttered. "Let us not encourage a world where women become equal with men." But the world was already changing. Around them, men who had apologized had begun returning to normal. Their bellies shrunk, their strength returned. Their wife looked at them with a new softness. They shared housework now, not because they had to, or because they understood. They became men of peace, and the village began to warm to them. But for the proud ones, isolation became a second cause. Their wives no longer helped them. Their children avoided them. They couldn't walk far. They couldn't eat much. Their words no longer carried weight. The spirit that had answered earnest tears was patient, but not forgetful. One afternoon, as the sun rested gently over the hills, Okocha, The village head himself stood before the people. His own belly ran as a drum. He was among the last of the proud ones. His face was pale, his ankles were swollen, yet even in pain, his pride stood tall. He addressed the village from the step of his compound. A crowd gathered below. "You want me to apologize," he said, voice cracking. "I have provided for my wife, built this house, raised this village. What man?" "You want me to apologize to my wife," he said, voice cracking. "I have provided for my wife, built this house, raised this village. What more do women want?" Silence followed. From among the crowd, Ernest stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but it carried. "Understand this," she said. "We want to be seen, to be heard, not just carried like load, but like loved humans." Okocha's lip trembled. He opened his mouth to reply, but instead, he doubled over in pain. A sharp, twisting pain ran through him, and he collapsed to his knee. The entire village gasped. A woman ran forward. It was Tengu, his first wife. She had served him faithfully for 20 years, bearing 5 children, never once asking him for help. She knelt beside him, gently lifting his head. "I never needed your money," she whispered, "only your kindness." He looked at her, tears brimming in his eyes. His lips quivered. "I am sorry." It came out cracked and broken, but it was enough. In front of everyone, the blood in his stomach began to shrink. The sweat dried on his face. His back straightened, and in the hush that followed, the last of the proud ones began to cry. Not from pain, but from the release of something long held in their chest. Shame, regret, realization. That night, a wind swept through Okocha, not a stormy one, no thunder or lightning this time, just a soft, cleansing breeze, as if the village itself was exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. In the days that followed, Okocha was no longer the same village, not by structure, but by spirit. The air was lighter. The sound of arguments gave way to laughter, to quiet conversations between husbands and wife, to song hymned under the breath by women who no longer walked like ghosts beside their men. The healing had begun, not just of swollen bodies, but of broken balances. The men who had returned to normal walked differently now, not with the arrogance of before, but with a kind of gentleness that made them seem taller. They asked their wives how they felt. They fetched firewood without complaint. They even learned the names of herbs their mothers once knew but never taught them. Okocha, the village head, who once backed orders from his throne, now spent mornings sitting beside his wife, playing yam with slow reverence. His apology had been late, but it had been real, and that mattered. He called the meeting in the square. No one there to beat drum. The villagers came on their own. "I have led this village with strength," he said, standing under the iroko tree, "but I have not led it with understanding. And that is not leadership. That is fear, dressed as tradition." Heads nodded, some slowly, others with hands clapping in agreement. "For years we thought being men meant being hard," Okocha continued. "Thought our women were built to carry everything. But strength is not silence, and manhood is not blindness." He turned to Tengu, who stood beside him with calm eyes. "We have walked half a journey. Now we must walk the rest together." Applause broke out, not wild, but sincere, the kind that echoed between hearts. Ene, who had watched from the side, felt her baby kicked. She smiled. Later that evening, the pastor gathered the young boys in the village, sons who had watched their fathers cry for the first time, about fairness, about love. "Let me tell you something," the pastors began. Sitting on the low wall of the schoolhouse, there was a time when men in Okocha never carried anything but pride. But your generation will be different. You will carry love, you will carry empathy, and you will not wait for a course to teach you. The boys nodded. Some didn't fully understand, but the seed had been planted. At the women's garden, there were no speeches, just laughter, cooking, stories, but something else had shifted. For the first time, the women weren't just sharing their pain, They were sharing ideas about land, about businesses, about voice. They can carry babies, one man's joke, pointing at the men. Now let's see if you can help them carry responsibilities. Even Mama Yange smiled at that, her old eyes glistening. The rivers flowed clearer that week. The rains came, but gently. The wind no longer carried whispers of imbalance. It was as if the land itself knew that something sacred had been restored. And Ene, her labor came quietly, one cool night under the stars. Oche held her hand the whole time. He didn't flinch when she screamed. He didn't run when the midwife backed orders. He only cried softly when he heard the baby's first cry. A girl. Ene looked at her daughter and whispered, "Welcome, child. You are welcome to a different Okocha." Years passed. Babies were born. Fields were planted. Songs were sung beneath the mango trees once more. And Okocha, the small village, somewhere in the hills of Benue, became something else entirely. It became a story, told first in whispers, then in fireside tales, then in distant village where no one had set foot in Okocha, but still knew its name. They call it the village where men became pregnant.